Very good morning, everybody. Let me just check if we are live or not. Give me a moment as I check if we are live. Um, right, we are live. I am back with another class curated to solving at least 50 VARC questions within 1.5 hours. Let's see if we are able to hit 50 today or not. Um, Again, today's questions will be addressing multiple topics pertaining to the verbal ability as well as the reading comprehension portions of our management exams. But before we delve into the questions, allow me to quickly take you through, an introduction to the Unacademy portal, the Unacademy platform. Unacademy is today India's largest learning platform for competitive exam preparation for any kind of test preparation. This YouTube channel is particularly targeted at management exams such as your CAT, GMAT, NMAT, ZAT, MAT, SNAP, and the likes. Yes, I am Prankur Arora. I'm going to be your instructor on this journey of learning, wherein I'll be covering multiple aspects pertaining to the verbal ability as well as the reading comprehension portions of these exams. I am a published author. I wrote a book called It's Not Funny, got published a couple of years back, even garnered favorably positive reviews from the likes of Viswapati Sarkar and Papa CJ. Um, it's a work of satirical fiction, right? So that is why I got satirists to kind of, read and give their comments. Um, I've been in the learning industry for a better part of the last couple of years as well, wherein I've consulted with companies such as Interglobe Air Transport, which is like the parent organization of Indigo Airlines, Interglobe, Becton Dickinson India, Marico, YTC. A lot of these organizations wherein I consulted on different aspects of learning and development, right? I even hold advanced certifications in facilitation from an American organization which goes by the name of Leadership Management International. It is perhaps the world's largest organization working in the space of leadership. And I co founded a startup by the name of Thought Sutra. Thought Sutra is essentially an endeavor to better the ecosystem of the creative arts in our country. So yeah, that's pretty much about me. Welcome aboard this journey of learning, and I am sure we're gonna have great fun together and a great learning experience as well. Uh, Great learning experience, particularly because there are quite a lot of features that add to the Unacademy advantage. Features such as access to daily live classes on the platform, wherein all interaction between the learners and the educator happens in real time. We can engage in discussions, you can ask me questions, we can have doubt clearing sessions. Even the question answers, they're conducted in the form of live polls on the platform, which is another adrenaline rush altogether. We conduct regular tests and quizzes as well, and the idea of these tests and quizzes is to help you evaluate your performance and help you develop perspective about your learning journey, about where you lie versus where you want to be, right? Also, all the courses on the platform are pretty much structured, very much in line with the exam syllabus to help you get the best of everything. And with one subscription to the platform, you get unlimited access to everything, all kinds of live and recorded courses that you can access from the comfort of any of your devices. The quite a lot of top educators, you can clearly see these are people who over the years have mentored thousands and thousands of aspirants into various top tier management institutions, be it your IIMs, MDIs, XLRIs, ISBs, you name it, they've cracked it, right? You can start learning from all these top educators for free before deciding whether you want to avail the key benefits that come along with the subscription to the platform or not. New batches, new courses, they keep on going live. Language is never a barrier either. We've got educators teaching in vernacular languages as well, right? Also, the really cool thing about the platform is that you design your own schedule. You decide what are the kind of courses you want to enroll into, who are the educators you want to be learning from. All that ownership lies on you, right? And as I said, every interaction will happen in real time. And the idea of the tests and the quizzes that we conduct is to help you develop perspective, as I mentioned. Now, how do we do that? We give you data, we give you insights into your performance. Data such as your topic wise scores, right? Your the time you're spending on every question. For example, if we conduct a test, we're going to tell you the time you're spending on a para jumbles question versus a para completion question. That will tell you where you ought to spend more time to better yourself, right? uh, you'll see that I'll be scribbling a lot of stuff on the class notes throughout this session. All these class notes, along with the educator annotations, they're made available to you once you subscribe to the platform. And talking of subscription, these are the various models. You can clearly see that as the time period of your subscription goes up, the cost of the subscription per month goes down dramatically, right? And the idea is that if you're going to be appearing for cat next year, 2021, I would highly recommend at least a 6 month or a 12-month journey, so that you give yourself that gestation period, you give yourself that time period required to develop a comfort level with the subject, comfort level with the with the pedagogy, comfort level with the resources, with the educators, right? And if you use my name Prankur, you'll get an extra 10% off on any of the subscriptions that you're going for. Having said that, let's begin with the first question for today, which is a spot the errors question. Uh, Make note of the fact that it says errors and not error, right? So there can be multiple parts that contain these errors. Figure that out and hit me up on the chat. Rock samples taken from the remains of an asteroid about twice the size of the 6 mile wide asteroid that eradicated the dinosaurs has been dated at 3.47 billion years old, and thus is evidence of the earliest known asteroid impact on Earth. I'll give you a hint. This is a subject verb agreement question. Alright. Now, it's very important to note that the subject of this sentence is rock samples. Rock samples is clearly this is plural, right? Now, let's check for the verbs. Rock samples taken from the remains of an asteroid, about twice the size of the 6 mile wide asteroid that eradicated the dinosaurs, has been dated. What has been dated? Rock samples. Rock samples is plural. Has is singular. So this is a the part that contains an error, because clearly this should be have been dated at 3.47 billion years old, and thus is again a singular verb, right? Is singular. Clearly, since we have a plural subject, this should be are dated, or rather are evidence of the earliest known asteroid impact on Earth. So parts C and E clearly contain the errors, right? Let's look at the next question. Kung Fu is not only an ancient form of self defense but also a complete belief system that includes spiritualistic views. Not only an ancient form but also complete belief system. So this correlative is parallel, right? This is parallel. That includes spiritualistic views on society, on psychology, and on nutrition. Clearly, D is the one with the error because we need the preposition only once. On society, psychology. So clearly, this is a list, right? So we can bracket off the list from the rest of the sentence. And nutrition. We don't need to repeat the preposition and again, right? Cool. Let's move on to the next question. The report recommended that the hospital should eliminate unneeded beds, expensive services should be consolidated, and use space in other hospitals. How do we rectify this? Spot the error here. Now, what did the report recommend? The report recommended three things. Number one, eliminate unneeded beds. Number two, consolidate expensive services. And number three, use space. So there's again, this sentence contains a list of three things, list of three verbs, rather, not things, verbs. Number one, eliminate. Number two, consolidate. And number three, use. Use space in other hospitals. So there's three things that they could be doing, right? This is a list of three things. So clearly, the second one, and obviously the second and the fourth, rather, the B and the D parts, they are in active construction, right? This is active voice, right? But when you look at part C, expensive services should be consolidated, should eliminate. Again, the usage of should the second time is redundant. We don't need to use should again. The report recommended that the hospital should, number one, eliminate unneeded beds. Number two, consolidate. The verbs, they need to be parallel. Eliminate, consolidate, use, right? So number two, consolidate expensive services, and number three, use space in other hospitals. So C is the one with the error, with the should being used unnecessarily, right? And the fact that part C is also slightly passive in construction when we have the other verbs in active construction, right? Next question. Again, spot the error here. The activism of state citizens who have demanded safer road conditions as well as stiffer penalties for intoxicated drivers have led to a significant decrease in the number of traffic incidents. What is the subject here? The subject is activism, right? Activism is singular. The activism of state citizens. Citizens who have demanded, have here is for citizens who have demanded safer road conditions as well as stiffer penalties for intoxicated drivers have led to a significant decrease in the number of. What have led? Activism has led. Activism is singular, so this verb also needs to be singular, right? So this needs to be has. Has led to a significant decrease in the number of traffic accidents. So D is the part that contains the error in this case. Let's move on to a sentence correction question. Joachim Raff and Giacomo Meyerbeer are examples of the kind of composer who receives popular acclaim while driving, often goes into decline after death, and never regains popularity again. Right? A thing to note here is what goes into decline. What goes into decline? The person, these people go into decline, or their popularity goes into decline. Right? How can the body of a person go into decline after death? Decomposes, right? Right? So this goes into decline needs to be about popularity, not about the people. Right? People cannot go into decline after death. Popularity goes into decline. So often goes into decline is incorrect. Whose reputation declines after death and never regains its status again. Okay. But whose reputation declines after death and never regains its former status. This who declines in reputation after death and who never regained popularity again. Uh, Again, who declines in reputation is incorrect, right? B and C right now seem the top contenders because we are talking about reputation declining. Then has declined is again incorrect. Then has declined in reputation after death and never regained popularity. Nope, right? Then has declined, not really, does not make sense, right? So, Joachim Reef and Giacomo Meyerbeer are examples of the kind of composer who receives popular acclaim while living, whose reputation declines after death and never regains its status again, but whose reputation declines after death and never regains its former status again. This but seems like a valid insertion, a valid conjunction. Why? Because we are contrasting the sentiment now, right? So we are talking about a composer who receives popular acclaim while living, but whose reputation declines, right? So we are contrasting the sentiment, and that is why but is apt. The usage of but is apt, and we'll basically choose that over option B where we don't have such a conjunction. right? So C is the correct answer in this scenario. Let's move on to idioms now. He left town under a cloud. Right. What is under a cloud? Under a cloud is basically an idiom for instances where somebody has, kind of done a scandalous thing. Somebody has committed a crime or something, right? So he left town under a cloud. Somebody has committed a crime and that has been found out. The person has been disgraced. So option two is the best in this scenario. He left town in disgrace, right? Next question. The young boy's act put his father in a pickle. In a pickle is in a very embarrassing or awkward situation. All right. The young boy's act put his father in an embarrassing or awkward situation. When I entered the house, everything was at six and sevens. When I entered the house, everything was at 6 and 7 means everything was in disorder or confusion. So whenever you have a lot of chaos, that is when you say, this is at 6 and 7. So the situation is at 6 and 7. His arguments cut no ice with me. Yeah, this solving this one can be slightly easier because there are quite a lot of terms with that we use when it comes to ice. We have icebreakers as well. What are icebreakers, right? So try and form a link there. Right? Icebreakers are basically when you want to uh, get familiar, when you want to start talking naturally, right? So his arguments cut no ice with me. His arguments had no influence on me. Did not hurt, did not benefit, did not make me proud. They're all very different ideas. It is clear that the ideas of both reformers ran in the same groove. It's clear that the ideas of both reformers ran in the same groove means they moved in harmony with one another. There were no clashes. Same groove is they're on the same plane. An analogies question. Now we're moving to analogy. Salt is noun. Salty is adjective. Similarly, cow is a noun and bovine is an adjective. Alright? Split is to part, marriage is to divorce, fission is to fusion, chasm is to grab. Right. So divide and unite. Divide is when things are dividing, obviously. Unite is when things are coming together. And similarly, fission is when things are breaking apart. Fusion is when things are joining back together. Right. Obviously, you get punishment for committing a crime, and similarly, you'll get penalty for committing a homicide. Nuts and bolts are a phrase. Together, they make up a phrase that's used together. Similarly, nitty gritty is a phrase. These words go together as a phrase. Just is to arbitrary. If things are not just, it leads to arbitrary conclusions. Similarly, if things are not in order, it leads to chaos. Parajumble's question now. All levels of demand, whether individual, aggregate, local, national, or international, are subject to change. At the same time, science and technology add new dimensions to products, their uses, and the methods used to market them. Aggregate demand fluctuates with changes in the level of business activity, GNP or national income. The demand of individuals tends to vary with changing needs or rising income. Now, the idea here is that if you look at it, sentence A tells us about different levels of demand: individual, aggregate, local, national, or international, right? And then when you look at sentence D, it says demands of individuals tends to vary with changing needs or rising income, right? And similarly, when you look at C, C talks of aggregate demand, right? Where so first we are moving to individual, then we are moving to aggregate, right? And then we conclude with sentence B, which says at the same time, science and technology add new dimensions to products, their uses, and the methods used to market them. So we'll move from A to D because then we start with individual demand, then we move to aggregate demand according to the description that is laid out in sentence A. That there are different levels of demand, whether individual or aggregate, and then we conclude with sentence B, right? So ADCB in this context becomes the best arrangement of these sentences. Let's look at the next one. Secret persons shall strike with weapons, fire, or poison. Clans mutually supporting each other shall be made to strike at the weak points. He shall destroy their caravans, herds, forests, and troop reinforcements. The conqueror shall cause enemy kingdom to be destroyed by neighboring kings, jungle tribes, pretenders, or unjustly treated princes. Clearly, we can see that this entire paragraph is going to be centered around, uh, war strategy, right? And when we look at the opening choices, we have sentences D, A, and B as the openers, right? Secret persons shall strike with fires, weapons, fire, or poisons. Clans mutually supporting each other shall be made to strike at the weak points. Now, both of these are elements of the strategy. But the first sentence, the opening sentence, has to be in the introduction, wherein you're developing context and laying out the idea of there being a war and us devising a strategy. And that opener is sentence D, where we say, conqueror shall cause enemy kingdom to be destroyed by neighboring kings, jungle tribes, pretenders, or unjustly treated princes. He here refers to the conqueror. So DC is clearly a link in that scenario, right? And then we move on to B, that clans supporting each other shall be made to strike at the weak points. And finally, we conclude with A, that secret persons shall strike with weapons, fire, or poison. So DCBA is the best arrangement of the sentences in that context. But a masterpiece is untaught genius, a laborious career than the lucky fluke of, more likely to come as the culminating point of. Right, when you look at all the openers, you have either sentences A or C as the openers. A starts with but a masterpiece is, C starts with a laborious career than the lucky fluke of. Right, now clearly, than cannot be used in isolation, more and than are used together, right? More and than are used together, than cannot be used in isolation, right? Therefore we will not begin with sentence E, we'll begin with sentence A, right? So we can eliminate options 1 and 3 right there. Now we have but a masterpiece is more likely to come as the culminating point of a laborious career than the lucky fluke. DC is a pair, C will follow D, C cannot come before D, right? So we eliminate option 4 there, and the only viable option remaining, the only viable arrangement remaining is ADCB, where we begin with A, um, but a masterpiece is more likely to come as the culminating point of a lucky career than the lucky fluke of untaught genius. So ADCB becomes the best arrangement in that context. Let's move on to the next question. Right. Look at these sentences now. To have settled one's affairs is a very good preparation to leading the rest of one's life without concern for the future. When I have finished this book, I shall know where I stand. One does not die immediately after one has made one's will. One makes one's will as a precaution. I can afford then to do what I choose with the years that remain to me. Now, when it comes to parajumbles, you always start with general and then you move to specific, right? So you'll start with general pronouns, third person pronouns, and then you move to personal pronouns, right? Therefore, we'll not begin with sentences B or D. We'll begin, because the both of them are using personal pronouns, we'll rather begin with sentence C, which uses a very general pronoun, which is one, very general reference to any individual, that one does not die immediately after one has made one's will. One makes one's will as a precaution. And then you move to sentence A. To have settled one's affairs is a very good preparation to leading the rest of one's life without concern for the future. Then you move on to B. When I have finished this book, I shall know where I stand. I can afford then to do what I choose with the years that remain to me. Right? Let's move on to the next question. Okay, I trust that you would have solved this by now. What interests you is the way in which you have created the illusion. They're angry with you, for it was the public is easily disillusioned, and then illusion they love, they do not understand that. Right. So, then you look at this. Sentence C is talking about how the public is disillusioned, and sentence B is talking about how they are angry because of the disillusionment, right? And then they D goes on to explain that they do not understand what it actually is, right? So what I'm trying to get at is that C will come first. We first talk about the fact that the public is easily disillusioned, and then we talk about why they're angry with it or how they're angry with it, right? So we'll start with C, then we'll move on to sentence B and say that they're angry. The public is easily disillusioned, and then they're angry with you, for it was the illusion they loved. They do not understand that what interests you is the way in which you have created the illusion. This is unnecessary. So CBDA, is the best arrangement in that context, in that from that point of view. You first talk about the disillusionment, and then you talk about the anger associated with it, or the anger pertaining to it. Right? This is a sentence elimination question. Alright, let's look at the sentences now. In laughing along, the target of the joke shows that he is a good sport, thereby completing the ritual. Ridicule can actually reinforce a group when the target is confident of their in group status. By laughing together at each other and at themselves, the rest of the group show their membership. Laughing at someone is among the strongest markers of social exclusion and human connection. Now, when you look at sentences A, B, and C, right, they talk about how laughing or humor can bring people together, right? He's a good sport, thereby completing the ritual. Ridicule can reinforce a group, right? It reinforces in group status. Laughing together it shows membership, whereas sentence D talks about how it is a marker of social exclusion, right? All the others are talking about coming together as a group, right? Strengthening that bond. D is talking about how laughing is a marker of social exclusion. So D in that context is the odd one out in this scenario. Another sentence elimination question. You've got to figure the odd one out. Let us write words, while emoji let us write gestures. Emoji are so widely used that they are rightly called the lingua franca of the world. They are the equivalent of gesticulating to add emphasis. While they convey a writer's intentions, emoji are not a language in themselves. Right. When you look at um, sentence A, it says letters let us write words, while emoji let us write gestures. Uh, B says they are very widely used. They are rightly called the lingua franca of the world. Right? They are very widely used. C says they are equivalent of gesticulating to add emphasis. D says they convey a writer's intentions. They are not a language in themselves. So A and C are talking about how emojis let us write gestures. C tells us how they are the equivalent of gesticulating, right? And D tells us how they convey intentions, but they are not a language in themselves. So A, C, and D are talking about one particular function of the emojis, that they help us write gestures and convey intentions, and they are equivalent of gesticulating. B, on the other hand, are basically telling us how emojis are so widely used that they are rightly called the lingua franca of the world, or a common language of the world, right? So B in that context is the odd one out, because A, C, and D together tell us how emojis are only fit to tell us about gestures and intentions, right? B uh, basically is telling us how emoji are a language in themselves, which is like the odd one out scenario in this case. Let's move on to the next question. Right, let's look at this now. Many of those who are racked with self-doubt often seek confirmation of their distorted self-perception. This seems logical, as those with a negative self-image would be just the ones who would want to overcompensate. The reason for their behavior is the desire for coherence. If others respond in a way that confirms their negative self image, that then the world is as it should be. In some cases, individuals actually provoke others to respond negatively to them in order hear their own bleak views of themselves. Right. So when you look at all these sentences, A talks about many of those who are racked with self doubt often see confirmation of their distorted self perception. People with self doubt, they seek confirmation of their self perception, right? So A and D can clearly be seen it can clearly be seen that A and D are linked, because D tells us how that happens, that in some cases these individuals, they provoke others to respond negatively so that they can hear the bleak view of themselves, right? And C gives a reason for the same. The reason for their behavior is a desire for coherence. If others respond in a way that confirms their self image, then the world is as it should be. Right? So, ADC in that context makes for a good paragraph, a cogent paragraph. B, on the other hand, is the odd one out, because B tells us how, uh, uh, you know, uh, this seems logical, as those with a negative self image would be just the ones who would want to overcompensate. There is no talking about overcompensating in the other sentences. There is no mention of the word overcompensate, or the idea that these people, these individuals, would be overcompensating in any way whatsoever. Right? So B in that scenario is the odd one out. Let's start with a comprehension now. Right. I hope you're done reading the paragraph by now. What is the paragraph talking about? It is talking about a study, right? Study by Gordon McKillop about rabbits, right? And very important thing is, during the study, McKillop released a set number of rabbits, right? The procedure. What is the procedure? Set number of rabbits into several enclosed regions, each containing one type of vegetation on which the rabbits subsisted. To keep numbers constant, each enclosure was surrounded by fence that was entrenched 10 feet into the ground, and all rabbits released in a certain area were of the same sex. I'll move on to the next paragraph now. The rabbits did the least damage in the pens containing grass, which many farmers cultivate as grazing land for their livestock. The average rabbit ate almost 300 pounds of grass in 1 year, which reduced the yield of 1 hectare, about 2.5 acres, by half a percent. This translates to more than $3 worth of damage per rabbit per year, a seemingly nominal sum until one considers that most grasslands are home to as many as 40 rabbits per acre. The rabbit's taste for barley was about the same as that for grass in terms of percentage. The cost was calculated to be almost $7 per rabbit. By far, the most endangered crop was wheat, which rabbits munch at a rate that depleted normal yields by more than 1% of the maximum. Since wheat is also the most expensive on the open market, McKillop's group calculated that one rabbit can eat almost $1 worth of the crop in 1 month. This can mean financial ruin for wheat farmers in areas with abnormally high rabbit populations. Farmers may now be able to attach a dollar value to the crops that rabbits feed on, but they still lack the most important piece of information that Dr. McKillop's study did not reveal: how to stop them. Shooting and trapping rabbits is too time consuming and inefficient to keep up with approximate 2% increase in rabbit populations every year. And most rabbits have developed resistance to viral diseases such as myxomatosis and viral hemorrhagic fever that have been introduced to curb reproduction. Even the age old remedy of releasing foxes on the property has been blocked by chicken farmers, whose commodity, according to ministry, contributes almost 14% of Britain's GDP. Let's look at the questions now. Which of the following statements best sums up the purpose of McKillop's experiment? Right. So if we look at this, as a result, farmers can gauge rabbit damage more effectively, allowing them to anticipate the crops they will lose and make necessary compensation. Right. So clearly, the idea being that the purpose of the experiment was how you can express the dollar value, the damage inflicted by rabbits on farmers' crops in more tangible monetary sense. Right? The author McKillop wanted to attach a dollar value to it all. Right? So there's that. And when you look at the other options, he contrasted several methods for establishing more credible methods for controlling rabbit populations. Uh, it's not the main idea. It's not the main idea. When you look at C, he endeavored to prove that rabbits are more destructive than most people perceive them to be. See, these are mentioned in the paragraph, but it was not the main purpose. And same goes for E, which says wanted to portray the rabbit in a less flattering manner. Not really. The idea was to attach a monetary this thing. And when you look at D, he hoped to determine the crop which rabbits showed the most ardent appetite for. See, the paragraph mentioned that that crop was wheat, but that is not the main objective. That was a finding. It was not the main purpose behind the experiment, right? So, B in that context was the main idea, wherein you wanted to attach a dollar value to the damage. Let's look at the next question. The passage supplies information about each of the following except. Right. So passage supplies information about each of the following except, right? Clearly, the answer is the best way to prevent rabbits from decimating a certain crop, right? The population density was mentioned, right? Uh, in the, I think it was in the third paragraph, right, wherein the author says uh, 40 rabbits per acre, right, or something like that. Um, yeah, 40 rabbits per acre. So the density is clearly mentioned. When you look at C, duration was obviously mentioned of the study, right? Rate at which rabbits normally reproduce, they increase by about 2%, right? Approximate 2% increase in rabbit. The amount of grass usually grown annually upon a hectare of land, that was also mentioned, right? About how many pounds of grass can be harvested, right? So the only thing that the author did not supply information about was the best way to prevent rabbits from decimating a certain crop, right? Because when you look at this, um, the only problem with the study is that it quantifies the loss without talking about without providing a solution to it, right? Several methods were mentioned, but the best way is never identified according to the entire passage. Each of the following can be inferred from the passage except. Let's go option by option, right? This question is slightly tough, right? So the easiest way to solve it is to work systematically. What do we know for a fact? When you look at when you look at option A, uh, in the agricultural marketplace, barley is at least twice as expensive as grass. We know that, right? We know that A is true because it mentioned $7 versus $3 when it comes to barley versus grass. So this is inferable. When you look at option B, at one point, myxotomasis and viral hemorrhagic fever were more effective than they are now. That is also mentioned in the paragraph that they've developed resistance to this disease. Earlier, it was introduced to curb the population, but now rabbit population has developed resistance to it. This is also inferable. The power wielded by a certain type of farmer is at least partly influenced by the financial impact of that farmer's product. So when you look at last option, when you look at this, right, even the age old remedy of releasing foxes has been blocked by chicken farmers whose common commodity, according to the ministry, contributes 14% to Britain's GDP, right? So this is also inferable, right? When you look at D, the cost incurred by farmers to rid themselves of large rabbit population far exceeds the monetary damage done to the farmer's crop. um See, when it comes to this, I'll put this on the back burner. Let me first look at five. That the rabbits are unable to tunnel through the ground at a depth that is greater than 10 feet. Uh, when you look at the second paragraph that talked about fences. Uh, hmm. Right. To keep numbers constant, each enclosure was surrounded by fence that was entrenched 10 feet into the ground, and all rabbits released in a certain area were of the same sex. Right? So it can be kind of it can be defended because fences were entrenched 10 feet into the ground in order to control the populations, right? So even this is inferable. So there's only D, option D, that cannot be inferred from the passage, that the cost incurred to rid themselves of large population far exceeds the monetary damage done to the farmers' crops. All the other four are kind of mentioned in the passage. This one isn't. So obviously, this cannot be inferred from the passage. Let's look at the fourth question. Which of the following hypothetical situations best exemplifies a potential problem that would most seriously undermine the merit of McKillop's study? Right. So, McKillop study, we know for a fact it relies heavily on, it relies heavily on population control, right? That is, there were so many parameters that were mentioned in the passage, right? When you go back to the passage, there were so many parameters, right? Set number of rabbits, enclosed regions, there were fences, numbers had to be kept constant, stuff like that. So there were a lot of control factors, right? So potential problem would be basically uh, when you when you're not able to control the population, right? So let's look at all the options one by one. Several rabbits developed a new strain of myxomatosis that renders each completely sterile. Are we concerned about sterility? Because uh, see, A isn't a problem because McKillop himself does not really want the rabbits to reproduce. That is why they were of the same sex, right? So A will have no problem. When it comes to B, due to decrease in supply, the price of barley suddenly doubles. Uh, if the price of barley doubled, McKillop would still be able to calculate the financial cost of the eating habits, right? So again, this does no damage. See, it is determined that younger, more energetic rabbits consume almost double the food uh, that an older rabbit does. It is determined that younger, more energetic rabbits consume almost double the food that an older rabbit does. See, this is close, but the data is based on the group in each enclosure, and it's impossible to predict if younger rabbits eat more, right? So, this does not really affect one bit. A rare drought inhibits plant growth in the enclosures for several months. Um, it is a 3-year study, right? So some months will probably not have any impact. The only impact would be from option E, that soon after the experiment, a predatory animal find its way into some of the rabbit enclosures, eats the rabbit, so the population is not controlled. In the last paragraph, the author is primarily concerned. Concerned about what? See, the last paragraph talked about, what did the last paragraph talk about? The last paragraph talks about methods that people have used to control rabbit population, yet no method stands out as the best idea, right? And they're not compared to each other, so we can kind of cross out option D, which says comparing the various methods that farmers have used in order to keep rabbit populations under control. There was no comparison that was going on, right? McKillop's study has not even provided any new information about popular control, and this is the one problem to which the author refers, right? Chicken farmers, they're mentioned in the last paragraph, but they are not the primary focus, so we can kind of get rid of option B as well, right? Suggesting rabbit and chicken farmers are often at odds. Not really. Citing evidence, study is woefully incomplete. See, incomplete is too extreme. Again, woefully incomplete is too extreme, and we need to avoid extreme answers, right? We know nothing about establishing foxes have an equal appetite for rabbits as they do for chickens. This, the passage did not supply any information about this. A is very much the inference that exposing a problem to which study has failed to supply a solution. Exactly, there was a problem, so many solutions were discussed, but no solution was identified as the best one, right? So yeah, that's pretty much it. With this, we come to the end of today's class. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you so much for joining in. I'll see you again. I'll be back with more questions. Right, a lot of the questions that we did today were previous year questions, right? So yeah. Wait. Yeah. So yeah, I'll see you guys again. I'll be back with another class curated with another set of questions. Till then, stay safe, stay strong, and stay mellow. See you guys.